Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
Welcome, everyone, to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. I am glad you could join me. Make sure you follow and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. Share this episode with your family and friends. And don't forget to check out the America's Founding series, where I talk about the forgotten patriots who helped shape the nation. And I want to get to my guest today because I have a great guest coming on. I have Shawn Farash, loud majority, friend of the show. Also, Benedict Arnold, who abandoned us here in New York. So, Shawn, welcome to the program. How are you today?
I'm doing well, and I will wear that badge of honor proudly that I got out of New York. Look, I spent a long time there, but the time came to get out, and Tennessee is a great place to plant your roots. It's a great place to live. I'll say that. I do miss the ocean, though. I will say I miss the ocean. But I will never miss paying state income tax to fund Kathy Hochul's salary. So,
well, I don't blame you, and I'm sure that the cost of living is much better there than it is here. Everyone needs to check out Ungoverned. Shawn hosts it. You can find it on Apple, Rumble, anywhere you get your podcast. So make sure to check out Ungoverned. So, Shawn, I really want to have you on because a few weeks ago there was an incident at your house in Tennessee. So can you explain to the audience exactly what happened?
Yeah, sure. It was certainly not enjoyable, but I will say I do enjoy telling the story because of how significant it is, and it shows you just how crazy these people have gotten, all right, and how far they're willing to go. Now, I'll say this right off the bat. I would never dream of doing this to anybody. That's not how I operate. Nick, you know that. We don't resort to violence. We make our case. We use logic. We use reason, right? We hash things out, and we have a conversation when we have a difference of opinion. The left doesn't operate that way.
The way normal human beings are supposed to operate, yes.
Right, yeah, the way you're supposed to do it. The left doesn't operate that way, and, you've seen it. I've seen it. We've all been there, but this was crazy. So about a month and a half ago, middle of March, it was March 13th. It was a long day. My wife and I just ripped out a chain link fence. We moved into the property a month and a half before that. There's a chain link fence in there we didn't want, so we just pulled it out ourselves. It was easy to do, but it was tough work, and so I was tired. I took a 20-minute nap on our couch, which is very comfortable. And my wife comes running in and goes, "Shawn, there's cops in our yard with guns." And I'm like, "What? We're being swatted." And the reason I knew that is because earlier that morning, I saw some of my favorite follows on X, Gunther Eagleman, Nick Sorter, some of these other guys that I follow saying they got swatted. So I'm like, all right, well, they came for us, right? So she didn't know what that meant, my wife. She said, swatted, what is that? She was thinking, despite pardon, you're not thinking about pardons. She was thinking J6, right? That I was going to get ripped out of the house and it was going to be this whole thing. And I said, no. Somebody probably called in a bizarre 911 call and said that something really horrible happened in here, and that's why they're here. They are making sure that didn't happen. That is exactly what happened. I actually have the 911 call. I haven't posted it because it isn't. First of all, it's on a CD, which is I haven't seen one of these in a long time.
They don't use thumb drives.
Yeah, apparently the sheriff's office doesn't. So fine. But I haven't posted the call because it's an active FBI investigation, counterterrorism, joint terrorism task force. I'm not trying to jeopardize anything, so I've listened to it though. So essentially, we're looking outside and there are cops with their guns pointed at the home. It's not a fun thing to see out your window, right? Especially when you've done nothing wrong. Okay. So I get a phone call and it's from the sheriff's office, the sheriff's department. And they're saying, that they received a strange call. They said, "This is Rutherford County Sheriff's Office. Am I speaking with Shawn?" I said, "Yes, you are." And right off the bat, I have a question because there's a number of your deputies outside in my yard pointing guns at the house. I would really love to know what's going on. And they said, "Well, we received a call that you murdered your parents in your house and that you're planning to commit suicide by cop, which is essentially what took place on this 25-minute 911 call. I said, well, I'm not the only person in the house. My wife is with me. Nobody's dead. We have 3 cats. We would appreciate if they didn't die either. One of them may hiss at you, and that's the most dangerous thing you're going to see in this house. And they said, okay. I said, listen, I'm willing to demonstrate anything I've got to demonstrate that what you heard on that call is not true. So you tell me what you want us to do, and we'll do it, right? Get it resolved very quickly. They said, well, we need to enter the house. You need to come out of the house. So we come out of the house, hands are up. We both get patted down. We're sitting down on a neighbor's driveway. There's cop cars, I want to say 5 or 6 cop cars down our street. Our street, which ends in a cul-de-sac, was shut down. Neighbors could not get home. There were additional cop cars in our back, around just off the across the property line in our backyard. There were fire trucks. There were ambulances because the call was that I'd murdered my parents and that people were bleeding out in the house and whatnot. So, I mean, it was a full response. Everybody was there. And it wasn't fun seeing somebody who I don't know, and I trust law enforcement, and these guys and gals with the sheriff's office handled it amazingly. They were calm. They were very clear with their communications, professional. Nobody was in a bad mood. Everybody wanted everybody else to be safe, right? But at the onset of that, I don't know which one of these men or women who are pointing guns at the house is on low sleep or is having a bad day. Maybe they're a little jumpy. I don't know. So I said, we can control what we're going to do. We're just going to calm down. We got out of the house. I spoke to them. I let them know this is something that's been going on across the country. At that point, I was like the 5th or 6th guy that had been swatted. There's like 18 now. But I told them that this is something that is happening, across the country, and it's politically motivated. And they said, well, how do you know it's politically motivated? I said, several of my friends who think and vote the same way I vote, take a look at the back of my truck. And they went, okay. I said, they got swatted too. And, they said, is this on the news? I said, it's not going to be on the news or you're watching, but it's all over social media. So, long story short is that's how it went down. Everybody, got through it, alive, thankfully, right? Nobody was hurt, which is good. Then we started getting, mysterious pizza deliveries to our house, as did everybody else who got caught up in this recent swatting. And the worst thing I'll say is this. And back when I lived on Long Island, we were very passionate about protecting children, whether it's masks or vaccines or what they're learning in the schools. And the same thing happened here. I asked one of the kids on the block. The neighbors are all pretty friendly, politically with us, and they know who we are now. So it's fine.
Welcome
everybody
to the
understands.
neighborhood.
We moved in a month and a half ago, prior to the swatting. This has never happened. They had never had a response like that in this neighborhood, ever. So now we move in, and there's massive rifles walking down the street. So and they're fine. They don't think we're terrorists or anything like that yet, I guess. But no, they're good. They're on our side. But I asked this kid, I don't know how old he is, maybe he's like 9, 10 years old, full of life. He's always riding up and down the block on his bike, scooter, and running, and he's just yelling and having a great time playing. Good kid. And I said to him, did you see that? He said, yeah. I said, what were you thinking, like when that was happening? And he told me that he was hiding under his desk crying that he was going to get killed. And I said, that's the worst part about it. That is, you could come at me. I don't want you to send cops to my house with guns. All right. I don't want you to send pizza things either. Right. But this whole neighborhood has never seen a response like that ever. Right. Until then. So now everybody's questioning, where do they live? Now everybody's questioning, why was that happening? You got kids who are thinking they're going to get killed. All right. So when we talk about swatting being treated as domestic terrorism, I always say, let's elevate the conversation away just from the people who got swatted themselves. Everybody on this block, as far as I'm concerned, got swatted, okay? They came into my house. But everybody on this block felt the impact of that in some way. They've never seen it. You got a kid who thinks he's going to die in a neighborhood that he's always up and down this block riding his bike. That got me more mad than the fact that they showed up to my house alone. Kid doesn't have to live like that. He shouldn't be living in fear. Now, he's not. He's out playing still, but I don't like hearing that for an hour. This kid was fearing for his life in his house, right? I mean, how many times do we hear the left? How many times do we hear the left saying kids, when they go to school, shouldn't have to practice active shooter drills? Meanwhile, he had to do that in his own home. I mean, it's unbelievable what was going on. So it is terrorism. It's domestic terrorism, should be treated as such. And when they catch these guys, because they will, they'll catch them. It's going to take a long time. Several layers of protection, VPN, burner phones. You know, these people concealed themselves pretty well, but they'll catch them. When they do, I want the kitchen sink thrown at these people, and I want an example made that if you do this, I don't care what side you're on, or if you're doing it because you're playing Call of Duty, you're going to jail for a long time because you're impacting more than just two people. They impacted this whole block and the blocks that are surrounding this, people wondering what kind of neighborhood do they live in, and that's not right.
Yeah, and they cost the taxpayer tens of thousands of dollars to conduct a response like that. But to me, I think that when you look deeper, you see the sinisterness behind it, because let's be honest here, the reason that they do SWATs is because they're hoping for something to happen. I mean, imagine it's 2 a.m. and your door is getting kicked in and you wake up groggy and you have cops shouting orders at you. You have no idea what's going on. You make one wrong move, let's face it. You know, these police officers are human beings. They're just as nervous in these situations as someone like you may be or your neighbors may be. Someone makes one wrong move, it could mean their life. And I think that's the intent of the left. It shows you how vile they truly are.
Yeah, well, these cops want to go home too, right? And that's why I had a lot of people. I started texting a lot of people when it was happening. I put posts on X to let everybody know what was going on. And I had a few friends of mine, and I'm not saying that they're not intelligent, but they were like, film it. And I'm sitting there going, I am not walking up to my window. There's a guy pointing a huge gun in my direction and doing this because they don't know that's a phone. Okay? So that, I'm like, no, we're just going to, I'll get my neighbor's Ring doorbell footage or something, which we wound up getting, the video of us walking out with our hands up and all the cops coming in. I mean, it's brutal to see that happened to us. It's like, it's surreal looking back a month and a half ago that happened, but it did. And that's what you're up against. That's what we're all up against, like we said at the beginning. I would never dream. I wouldn't even send pizza to somebody's house I don't like. I'd probably do it as a prank to like a friend, but I wouldn't do it as, because
pay for it too.
Yeah, I would pay for it. These aren't paid for. These are COD. But,
exactly.
Which I can't believe they still do anymore.
Because they don't care about small business owners either. To them, It's a means to an end. So they'll even hurt them.
But I would never do something. I would not put somebody on the other side of the barrel of a gun because I don't like who they vote for or I don't like what they said on their podcast. You know what I do when I don't like somebody or what I don't like who someone voted for? I just scroll past them. I don't watch their show. Maybe someone's on and I don't like what they say. I just turn it off. You got the remote. You could just.
But that's the amazing part, because this wouldn't even cross your mind or my mind or most conservatives' mind. Most of us would never even think about doing something like this. We wouldn't waste 5 seconds even thinking of something like that. That's the amazing part. Yeah.
I mean, we have both of us, you and I, and many people we know, much better things to do with our time than to do what this guy did on this call. I mean, and he sold it. He sold it well. Obviously, because they came in full force. But I mean, never would I think, you know what? I'm kind of bored. I don't like this guy's podcast. I'm gonna send a SWAT team to their house. No, I mean, it's like these other people online that'll like mass report you to get you shadow banned. Like, do something. If you worked as hard as you do to be a nuisance to society, and you put that much energy into doing something useful, you'd be very wealthy. You'd have a totally different idea of capitalism, by the way. I'll tell you, it's unbelievable.
Now, I don't know if you could answer this question, but do you have any idea if we take all of you together, the Nick Sorda, Gunther Engelman, Joe Pags, was it the same person that made those calls, or does it seem like this is coordinated, organized, and it involves a much larger thing going on?
You know what? It's kind of, we go back and forth on that every day. Some days we get some evidence from various people. We're like, all right, it's one guy. Some days we say, oh, maybe it's a group, I would say this is where all of those cases are definitively linked to one another. Whether it's one person doing it or one group doing it, the jury's still out. But it's all definitely linked together. And I've heard some of the other 911 calls, and I will say that they sound similar to my 911 call in terms of the voice, not just the subject matter, but the voice. So is it one person, or is it multiple people using a voice changer in the same, modular? I don't know. I have no idea, but they're all linked. All of them are linked. And whoever it is, if it's one guy, if it's a group, I want them held accountable.
Absolutely. And I think, we could even broaden it out further. You look at what's going on with the Tesla dealerships and the attacking of anyone who's driving a Tesla. Like, people are unhinged from the left in this day and age, but it all stems from the top. And that's what the heart of the matter. When you have media outlets on a 24/7 basis, and you have academia, and you have the Democrat Party itself screaming that Trump is Hitler, that he's a Nazi, that we're living in a dictatorship, and anyone who supports him is a Nazi too, aren't they condoning this type of behavior?
Yeah, it's only a matter of time before people start saying, "Oh, they're Nazis. We have to kill them." Right? I mean, that's the whole. And we've been talking about that aspect of it for longer, but really came to the forefront on July 13th when Donald Trump was shot. It's no surprise that Donald Trump was shot, because when you call him literally Hitler, and the hypothetical question is always floated around, well, if you had a chance to kill Hitler before he took power, what would you do? Like that question always comes up. People ask that question. When you start calling this guy literally Hitler, fascist, Nazi, and you start saying that these supporters are traitors and, insurrectionists and terrorists, you're planting that seed. It's Inception, the movie Inception. You're planting that seed in the minds of these people. These are bad people. You have to. The only way to stop them is to kill. It is. I say it's the fruit of the poisonous tree of cancel culture. It started with, we'll just get them fired, right? Or we'll just deplatform this person, right? Or we'll just get their account banned. And then when, free speech platforms like Rumble and X became a lot more friendly, and you have, Gab and some of these other platforms that aren't as ban happy, that'll take you, Getter, Truth Social, where you won't get shut down. That no longer became a solution for the left, right? Cancel culture, you can't cancel people all the way anymore, because there's always somewhere else where you're going to be able to go, right? So now it's not just about canceling or deplatforming. Now they got to come for, we're going to demonetize. So we're going to go after your sponsors. And then when that doesn't work, because you're getting your sponsors from, small businesses who are maybe sympathetic to your cause, like some of my sponsors are, who are, on our side politically, right, where we built this parallel economy, that doesn't work. So eventually you work your way down the line and you become more drastic. And it's like, well, the only thing that's actually going to stop the people that they don't like is to kill them. And that's where they are. Cancel culture has metamorphosized into assassination culture, where unless, the ends justify the means in their eyes. That's what's happened. It all comes from that. Look, this is why I don't care if I see somebody on my side, on the other side, who says something that I think it might be ridiculous. I may think it's vile. I may think it's totally wrong, right? Whether it's somebody on our side who has specific opinions about something that I don't agree with, or somebody on the left who I don't agree with. I do not want these people banned. Unless they're explicitly calling for violence, right? I mean, if you're out there trying to hurt people, that's not legal. But when you are, if we disagree, let's say, on the Israel-Palestine conflict, but you're not calling for the death to America or the death to Jews, you're just saying, hey, I don't like the relationship that the United States has with Israel, I don't have a problem with that. Speak. By all means, keep speaking. I want people to see all available viewpoints, across the political spectrum, because then they can contrast that with something that you say or that I say, and they can actually form a better opinion, a more educated opinion, and feel better about where they stand. I don't like bans. I don't like seeing people censored. I don't think it's appropriate in any form unless they're like directly encouraging violence, which, obviously I'm against, but this is why I don't dabble in cancel culture. Well, I can make an exception here. Once you make one exception, you could apply it to so many other people, and then when your solution doesn't work, you have to become more drastic. That's where the left has gotten
And that's
to
a
here.
great point. And listen, when you start suppressing people's speech and shutting down speech, then there's only one path to go down, and that's totalitarianism. And the only way to defeat that is through revolution. And so it's dangerous. That's why the founding fathers didn't put limitations on speech. It's why the founding fathers wanted more debate and dialogue, not less of it. And we look at Democrats. Now, I grew up in the Dick Gephardt, Tom Daschle, Bill Clinton era. I can't believe I would ever say that I actually miss those Democrats. Those Democrats no longer exist. What is going on with the Democrat Party? I mean, when we look at it and who they'll sit there and fight for, men and women's sports, they're making a huge deal of Abrego Garcia, someone who now we learn there's a new report out there that he threatened his wife's kids, and there's another domestic battery charge, and she was afraid that he would murder her and told her that there was nothing anyone could do about it. I mean, you have Democrats flying down to El Salvador to bring back Abrego Garcia, yet they never called Rachel Morin's parents, Laken Riley's parents. They never expressed concern over Americans. They're outraged that Elon Musk would dare to look at waste, fraud, and abuse in government. When you look at the Democrats, what is going on with their party?
Well, this is as simple as I can say it, right? It is a cult of TDS, right? And everyone looks at TDS. It's a meme, Trump derangement, haha. But it's real, right? So, when you see people like, for instance, Scott Jennings on CNN saying that Republicans and Donald Trump and MAGA supporters are on the 80 side of the 80-20 issues, well, the Democrats voluntarily are taking the 20 side of the 80-20 issue because Donald Trump has espoused common sense, right? When he says, we don't want men and women's sports. 5 years ago, I would look at that and say, okay, that's something that the Democrats will probably just not even respond to. They won't actively take the other side of it, right? Now they're like, we must have men and women's sports. Why? Because Trump wants the opposite. That's the problem, So, I want Donald Trump to do, maybe I'll make a video doing this. Maybe this will be fun. I hereby endorse oxygen. We love breathing, right? It's a great thing to do because they will all hold their breath, right? That's what the left will do. I mean, that's how crazy it has gotten. So,
if I would have told you in 2022 that Senator John Fetterman would have been the voice of reason in the Democrat Party, what would you have thought?
I would have said, how much have you been drinking, right? I mean, what is going on here, right? John Fetterman, right? So these people are whatever position Donald Trump takes, okay? They have to take the opposite, right? He wants to end the war in Ukraine. They're like, no, more war. The Democrats, who used to be the doves, right, the anti-war party, are now the pro-war party simply because Donald Trump wants to end a war. Right?
We're rooting on China because Trump put tariffs on them.
Right? I mean, look, he wants to get a fairer trade deal with China and the rest of the world, not just China. And they're like, no, we don't want that. We want worse deals.
Xi Jinping, stick it out. Fight back. Don't give in to Trump. Seriously, that's what they say.
You can't take these positions and win an election. Look, it's one thing. It's like one thing with abortion. That's always been a tough issue in politics. But so you brought up Abrego Garcia, right? So the border. And I remember leading into 2024, they were like, oh, Trump and the Republicans are blocking the bipartisan border bill. And we were all like, no, just enforce the laws that we have, right?
It's amazing how that works.
One of the funniest things and one of the worst things people don't understand is they'll stop enforcing the law, right? Then they'll ask for new laws that take your rights away and my rights away. But they say, no, it's not about you. It's about the bad guys. So we willfully surrender our rights or portions and we let it get eroded away because we think the bad guys are going to get taken care of when all they're doing is coming after the good guys and letting the bad guys thrive. So they tell us we're blocking the border bill. We're not blocking anything. Just enforce the laws that we have. Donald Trump, is sworn in. Day one, he's like, all right, we're going back to enforcing laws we already have. 97+% drop on both borders. I mean, so you see, the way it works when you have a president who actually tries, but they look at this open border thing and they're like, let's keep letting them in. And then when you want to, so you can let in the people illegally, right? They're like, you can let them in all the same time, no process. You can claim asylum from anybody's street corner that you want, whenever you want to do it. But then when you want to deport them, Right. But then when you want to deport them, it's like each and every one of them deserves years worth of due process. What? So the law only matters when we ask them to leave, but not when you ask them to come? Right? So this is, and it's all because, well, that obviously is a threat to their power and the idea of bringing in new voters and the census and all that manipulation. But it's all about every position that Donald Trump takes. He could take a position that pizza is good, and you will see the left tomorrow say pizza is the worst food ever. And you could have a video of them eating Domino's, 2 nights ago before Donald Trump said it. That is how bad it has gotten for them, where they can't even admit. I could look at if Joe Biden came out over the course of his 4 years and coherently said, we got to get the illegals out of our country and we got to secure the border and we're going to enforce the laws on the books. I'd be like, listen, I don't like the guy, but he's right. You know what I mean?
But his auto pen couldn't say that.
His auto pen couldn't say that. But Donald Trump could say something that the left actually agrees with. I mean, he could come out and be like, we love gay marriage. And they'd be like, we hate gay marriage. You know what I mean? Like, they would.
It's gotten to the point where I was talking to a Democrat and I actually had to provide them advice. I'm like, what don't you understand? It would be much smarter if Democrats take what Elon Musk finds, puts it in a bill, says we want to eliminate this spending, and then says we want more access to what Elon Musk is doing. Like we want to see what's going on, but we agree that we need to get rid of that. Like you'd sound normal, but they won't do that. Instead, it's like an all or nothing approach.
Right. They're like, they've taken the side of the waste, of the fraud, and of the abuse. So like you said, it's not that they're, anti-waste, fraud, and abuse, and pro having more oversight of Elon Musk. They have just simply become pro waste, fraud, and abuse because Elon and Donald Trump have decided to declare war on waste, fraud, and abuse. And like you said, that it would be normal. It would be normal to just say, hey, we agree. Let's stop wasting money because it's taxpayer money and we should be investing it and using it in a more efficient and in a way that's sound. But we would like a little more oversight over what Elon's doing because
or here's the programs we don't think should be cut because then we would actually listen.
Right. And
but
they're not doing
adults.
that. They're just like, no, you can't. He can't do anything, and we must keep all of the waste and all of the fraud and all of the abuse. And people, that's not popular. That's not popular.
No, it's not. It's 80-20, like you said. Now, as we wrap up here, I want to get your thoughts on the second Trump administration. Let's do a little report card. How do you think overall, obviously with immigration, we know it's great. But overall, what do you think about Trump? And is there anything that this administration has done that you think is amazing or disappointing?
Well, the border, I think, has been fantastic, and that's been his staple of his campaign since 2016. Build the wall, mass deportations, all of that, right? So the border has been, I think, his best success, and it's something that he can directly, impact, right? Where we're going to enforce the laws on the books. We've got a 97+% drop on both borders in illegal immigration. We're using tariffs as a negotiating tool with Mexico and Canada to curb fentanyl. We're using it around the rest of the world to negotiate better trade deals, generate some revenue for the United States. These are all things that he can directly do, and I think he's handling it very well. And I understand the short-term pain with the tariffs, and I'm willing to pay a little more for some of these things that may come from other countries if Donald Trump's goal is to replace the IRS with the ERS and offset income tax for earners under $200,000 a year. I'm willing to see it through and see if it'll work, right? It may not.
Let's be honest. If he could get countries to move 20, 30, maybe even 40% in our direction, obviously he's not going to get everything he wants, but if we can get 20% more favorable terms, I mean, that's a huge win.
It's a huge win. So I think the things that he has direct control over, the tariffs right now, the border specifically, I think he's done very well. I'll say one of the worst. There were two bad black eyes for this administration. One of them has just kind of gotten shaken out with Mike Waltz. He's out. So he's done. Alex Wong is out with him, the whole Signalgate thing. And from the very beginning, his story never passed a smell test. Oh, my contact got sucked in. That's not how Signal works. I use it every day. If it's your group chat and it says you added the person, they were in your phone. I don't care that a reporter was in your phone. I don't like Jeffrey Goldberg. I don't care that he's in his phone. Mike Waltz is a politician. Reporters talk to politicians. That to me is not the smoking gun. The smoking gun is that he lied or was being distruthful or untruthful, dishonest about kind of the dynamic there. So Waltz is out. I thought Signalgate was a bad look. Although it wasn't classified information, it wasn't a good look that journalist got in there. By far, I think the worst thing that had happened in this administration, and it's kind of superficial when you think about it. It doesn't really impact us, but it just doesn't look good, is the way Bondi handled that Epstein situation.
That was terrible.
I'm not saying that all the files need to be out today, but to go on Fox News the night before and say, we have it and it's disgusting, and then the next day we don't have it, but here's a couple of binders, now have some fun. She was really bailed out because that Friday afternoon is when Zelensky had his temper tantrum in the Oval Office and kind of shifted the attention away from that disaster. I mean, I call the Epstein thing the 3-ring binder, 3-ring circus, because that's exactly what it was. But superficial. It has no impact on the cost
but I don't
of
think
eggs
it.
and all this type of
See,
stuff.
now I have to disagree with you because I don't think it was superficial. I was worried about Bondi from the beginning because an attorney general, you need a real pit bull in there. The bureaucracy, it's a powerful force, and they're looking to eat you up and spit you out, and they set her up for failure, and she fell for it hook, line, and sinker. They gave her
right.
information that was already publicly available. So now I feel like, how can I have faith in the leadership at the Department of Justice if she allows those under her to undermine her leadership? And to me, that's a big problem because the Department of Justice was one of the most dangerous, corrupt departments that existed within government. And so I think that's a big problem with Pam Bondi because we still haven't gotten the Epstein file. I mean, I would have ordered everyone into the Department of Justice. I would have looked at the material before I actually released it, so I knew that it wasn't all the material. And it just showed a certain type of laziness on our part.
One of the worst aspects of that whole fiasco was that she did get played by the Southern District of New York. And that's a bad look. I will say, I mean, that's what I'd say. It's a black eye. But it doesn't, to me, impact some of the bigger issues like, the border, the cost of food, inflation and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
This is something that whether the files came out or didn't, our lives probably don't change one way or the other. That's not to me saying I don't want justice. I want justice.
No, you've
I
been
want to
calling for
find
the
out.
Epstein files to be released, so that's not
Forever.
a secret. But I think it goes beyond the Epstein files because of the way the Department of Justice was weaponized against political opponents. It's rotten, and it's got to be fixed. And if it's not fixed in 4 years and Democrats take over, it's just going to go right back to their old ways, And even the FBI. Now, I am slightly optimistic with Kash Patel, Dan Bongino. Obviously, we're seeing certain movement in certain areas. But there's a number of things that they could do immediately that doesn't require time. If you're investigating FBI agents for abusing their power, that takes time. I get that. And I'm willing to give them time to do that. But reinstating whistleblowers, releasing who is behind the Catholic memo, exactly how did that happen, and then terminating the agents that were behind crafting the Catholic memo. There's 3 people involved. It's not hard to terminate them. Things like that they could do right away, immediately. Release all the Russiagate files from the FBI that were declassified in 2020. Do you think Kash Patel and Dan Bongino need to start moving a little bit quicker on some of the things that aren't that complex?
I think, look, I'm always going to be frustrated with the pace because it doesn't matter where I live now. I come from New York, right? So, I mean, I want things to move quick. I hate sitting in traffic. I have done actual damage to the interior of my truck because of traffic. So, I'm impatient. So, should they move quicker? I'm always going to say yes, but I don't know what they're dealing with. I don't know who they're dealing with. I don't know the level of rot. It's one thing to be like, hey, get over here, move fast, but then to be looking at somebody in muck boots, knee deep in mud, it's almost impossible to move that quick. The government moves slow. I have faith that they're going to make it right. These 2 men wrote books about it. They have been very outspoken about what they believe happened and how they believe it happened and who they believe the perpetrators were. But it does take time. And if it did, and I will say this, if these crimes and whatnot, the Catholic memo and all those things took place in D.C., Well, we don't have a D.C. attorney right now, a U.S. attorney that's been confirmed that can even prosecute these cases. And that leads me down this, this road of we all got to do a really good job, specifically as what I've been told in Louisiana, Utah, Mississippi in particular, calling our senators and respectfully demanding the confirmation of Ed Martin as U.S. attorney out of D.C. Because if we want these arrests, Comey and Schiff and the corrupt FBI agents, and these crimes took place in that jurisdiction, well, A, we're going to have to build an airtight case that will make a jury, and a jury that comes from a jury pool in a jurisdiction like D.C. that, voted 95% in favor of Democrats and Kamala Harris. We got to find a way, A, to get a case that's airtight enough to convince that type of jury. But B, we need somebody who's going to prosecute that case. That somebody will be Ed Martin, but only if he's confirmed. And that confirmation is kind of in limbo right now.
And we need real evidence. We're not like the Democrats. We don't want to weaponize the system. We want evidence that crimes were actually committed and prosecute them.
That's right. So it's going to take time to make a lot of these things happen. The FBI, though, they apparently have reassigned the agents that were photographed kneeling in the George Floyd riots. Right. So the way it was put was these agents haven't been fired, but they have been reassigned to a position that is far less desirable than the position that they were in. So I don't know if they're cleaning toilets or sweeping floors or what they're doing, but there's some movement there as well. Hey, you were doing this kneeling thing. This is not a place for virtue signaling. You now have a new position.
Well, I'm hoping that we see the reforms come quickly.
Same here.
To say the least, because, again, I look at it. If Trump's successful, we get to keep the White House, I do believe. However, at any moment, things could change. And so the more reforms we put in now, it's going to be much harder for Democrats to undo. Everyone needs to check out Ungoverned with Shawn. Always great to have on. Love talking to you, and all the best to you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.